It's about more. It's about ideas. Now, there are things we can't do. There are things, like at the economic level and the political level, there are things that Muslims can't do because they're immoral in our tradition. They're against our morality. We can't use weapons of mass destruction because they're against our Islamic framework, right? We can't use immoral economic tactics. We can't compete with banks that charge people interest, right? We can't compete with the IMF that charges countries interest, because interest is haram. There are things that we just can't do on moral grounds. The world is very, very different, but it's different because of a set of ideas and ideologies than just the technology that we see before us. All right? Now, those ideas like secularism, ideas like I hesitate to say liberalism, but not in all of its facets, but particularly the idea of individual liberty when taken to the extent that the West has taken it, right? Ideas like individualism and things like that. These are philosophies that you and I don't realize it, but they shape the way society is structured today. The way people behave, right? Behind it is individualism, right? Our children get taught subjects in school that are shaped by these ideas, that are influenced by these ideas, right? But these ideas, because they've had 200-300 years to settle into society, they have become part and parcel of society. So therefore what happens is, you don't realize it, but our children, our 12, 13, 14-year-olds are picking up these ideas from cartoons, from TV programs, from movies, even from computer games, right? And it's always connected to things like individual liberty. So for example, I'll give you an example. This is it's a difficult one for everyone, but I'm going to mention it because your children are going to be taught about this in primary school from the age of 7, by the way, in case you didn't know, right? So for example, homosexuality, you might think, oh my God, how is this okay and how is society accepting it? Well, that's connected to the idea of individual liberty and the idea of individualism. It's because of those philosophies that European society sees nothing wrong with that. And it's not like, oh, they've always been like this, that in Europe homosexuality has always been accepted. No. It was a gradual journey. They realized that we think differently now. According to the way we think now, there's nothing wrong with this. And so gradually it gains acceptance. People who engage in it are tolerated. Eventually, these people campaigns for it to become legal. It becomes legal. Then the homosexual marriages gay marriages are recognized, etc., etc. Now it's got to a stage where it is promoted to the extent that our children are taught in school that this is okay and we have to tolerate it. And if they're unlucky enough to end up with a particularly liberal-minded teacher, then that teacher will go beyond the mandate of the government. The government just wants our children to know that there's different types of families. And some families have 2 fathers and some families have 2 mothers, right? That's all the government wants. But if the teacher is liberal-minded, the teacher is going to go a little bit further and try to promote it in the minds of the children. Does that make sense? Where does that come from? Why am I saying the liberal-minded teacher? Why is she doing that? She's doing that because she is liberal-minded, meaning she subscribes to a certain philosophy, a set of ideas, right? Generally, Muslims are completely asleep to this stuff. We think, oh, that teacher, she did this because she's a kafir, she's a khabith, she's that, she's this. But behind it is a sophisticated set of ideas that are still anti-Islamic. Islam has a problem with them, right? But because we've been so blind to them, we've not engaged those ideas and tried to tackle them. Or as a minimum, at least educated our children to the dangers of those ideas. We haven't done that. Now the next danger. The next danger is that our children gradually from childhood through primary school to secondary school, and then in particular towards the end of secondary school through sixth form and then at university, start to value these ideas. They start to think of these ideas as good ideas. Why not? Because these ideas are about individual liberty, are about freedom, they're about equality, they're about these are all good words. These are all fantastic words, right? When you hear the word, immediately you think, yeah, this is really, really good, right? So they start to take these ideas on as an important part of their moral worldview. Like, they think what is right and what is wrong is based on these principles, right? Then they find out, suddenly they realize that in their religion, there are some things that go against these principles. In their opinion. In their religion, they find that some things go against these ideas in their opinion, right? Because, you know, let's face it, like the modern world is talking about, the modern world is, you know, has given us feminism. Feminism calls for equality between men and women, and Islam says a woman gets half the inheritance of a man. If there's brothers and sisters, the brothers get double the inheritance of men. Where's the equality? So in that person's mind, immediately they think of that as unequal, as going against equality, right? Once they think that, what's happening is they are measuring Islam against a different idea. Islam is being measured against another standard. And that standard isn't their objective morality. Because sometimes it's okay, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and sent the Quran to give da'wah to who? To non-Muslims, isn't it? Everybody wasn't already Muslim, were they? He called the Quran, and the Prophet ﷺ called non-Muslims to Islam, right? So therefore, the Quran and Islam and the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ were calling people to see that Islam is right. Islam is right, and what they were doing before is wrong. That means those people had to think about it. They had to think, okay, let me see. Is what we did before right? Is how we treated women before right? No, it's not. You know, is this better? Yes, this is better. Meaning they had to measure it against something, right? But they measured it against their common sense and things like that. If people are measuring it against their common sense and they're taking all of the facts on board and then thinking, okay, what is right, what is wrong, then that's okay. But that's not what your young 18, 19-year-old Muslim at university is doing. He isn't measuring it against some sort of objective standard, right? He's not thinking, okay, let's think of this purely from the point of view of common sense. Let's take all of the facts on board. No. He's measuring it against a standard that has already influenced him, that belongs to a complex ideology that is 300-400 years old. He's measuring it against secular principles, against liberal principles. He's measuring it against the Western concept of equality. Not equality objectively speaking, the idea of equality objectively, but the Western conception of equality. I'm sorry if this is too complicated for some of you, but I have to explain this to people because otherwise we're in serious trouble, right? So now what's happening is he's saying, okay, if Islam doesn't measure up to these things, then Islam can't be right. If Islam doesn't measure up to these things, Islam can't be right. That is your average Muslim youngster, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put the light of hidayah inside his heart so firmly that when he hears of these things, he says, astaghfirullah, and he just basically rejects it. Or there's another possibility. He hears about these things and then he actually uses his common sense. Because what does common sense say? Common sense says, actually, before I make any kind of judgment, let me go and see what my religion actually says. Right? So what he does is he goes and finds out more about his religion. And he fills his knowledge gap. There's lots of things about his religion he doesn't know. Most of us, when we grow up, right, we attend the masjid for our Islamic education. Correct? This echo is a bit too much, man. Right? When we grow up, we go to masjid to get our Islamic education. And we're taught, first thing we're taught is we memorize certain things. We learn alif, ba, ta, tha, and we memorize kalima tayyiba la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, kalima shahadat ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika la. And then some people in the north, they learn third kalima subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar. Fourth kalima la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu lahul mulku kalima radd kufr. Then they don't learn what any of that means. The majority of madrasas don't teach them what any of that means, what the concepts behind it are, none of that. They just memorize this stuff. Then they'll memorize their surahs to get ready for salah. All All right? And year after year, decade after decade, this is how we teach our children. Then alif, ba, ta, tha, and then 1 hour every single day of maktab for 10 years is spent on learning how to read the Quran. Like, it's the most mind-boggling thing in the world. Like, why does it take 10 years to learn how to read a language? You're not even trying to understand it, you're just trying to read it. Why does it take 10 years? It's like, are we like intellectually disabled or something? Why would it take 10 years when actually, if you do it properly, it takes 6 months? You can learn to, if you start at the right age, it takes 6 months to go from alif, ba, ta, tha to learn to read the Quran. But we spend 10 years. And what do the parents do? Parents are like, Mullah sahab, amar Quran Sharif sabah kundin loibo. So now the Mullah sahab is under pressure. Oh my God, the parents are pressuring me to get the child started on Quran, and he's been on Qaida and Sipara for 2 years, 3 years. Well, first of all, he doesn't need to be on Qaida Sipara for 2, 3 years. You shouldn't have started him in the first place at the age of 5. Why does he need to read Quran at the age of 5? He doesn't need to read Quran at the age of 5. Start him at the age of 8. It'll take 6 months to a year for him to start reading the Quran fluently. Boom, job done. Right? And that's not even fard. Tilawah of the Quran is mustahab. What's fard? The surahs that he memorizes to recite in salah, that's the fard component of the Quran. Right? So therefore, all of that time is taking up. So now they're not actually being taught any concepts in their deen. So now they are 14 years old, 15 years old, and the pressures of GCSE begin. Pressures of GCSE begin, right? So they leave madrasa, they leave maktab. Some madrasas, girls, they stop at 11. And they stop the girls from attending. Nowadays, there are some female teachers, alhamdulillah, so it continues. But they too, when GCSE pressures start, they don't listen to their parents so much. Parents want to continue to send them to study Quran, right? And the kids are like, nah, mom, nah, dad, like, I got so much revision to do. I got exams to prepare for. I'm in year 10, I'm not doing very well in school. They make all these excuses. Madrasa education stops. From that point onwards, less than 1% of the Muslim community's children continue any form of Islamic education. Less than 1%. Before that, 70% receive a maktab education, according to some statistics done by some organizations. 70% receive I'm not saying an Islamic education, because if it was truly Islamic, they'd learn more. But they receive a maktab education, in the masjid, with a private tutor, etc., right? Until 70% until 14, 15 years of age, and then less than 1% continue any form of Islamic education, right? Then when they go to university, tell me, what do they know about Islam that enables them to resist the ideas that they encounter at university? Nothing. If they're fortunate, they'll end up with good friends through the Islamic society and so on. They'll end up with good friends, some knowledgeable brothers and so on, and because of that, they'll be safe. Or they will just shut it out. You know what? I value my religion. I value my identity. This is my identity. I'm a Muslim. Anything that's against Islam, I'm not going to listen to it. And they just shut it out. But they shut it out ignorantly, meaning they shut it out without thinking about it. They don't want to think about it. I have my religion. I'm going to keep practicing it. I'm committed to it. That's a good thing. That's actually a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Perhaps it's their parents' du'as or something from the ghaib that is protecting them, right? But they're still not in any kind of a virtuous position, because the virtuous position is to seek knowledge. The right thing to do in that situation is to seek knowledge and to understand deen. That is the proper, logical, as well as religious response. That when a question confuses you, right, then you seek the answer, right? You ask somebody who has knowledge of the answer, and you don't stop until you get the answer. And the Prophet ﷺ said this, right? Shifa'ul ayyi su'al, innama shifa'ul ayyi su'al. The frustrated person, the confused person, their healing, their cure is to ask somebody the question, right? So that they can get their question answered. Anyway, how am I doing for time? Right, it's really hot in here. So you all see the problem, right? So we have a serious problem in our community to fix. And I'm explaining this because there's adults here who come to the masjid. That's why you're here, right? You come to the masjid, right? And you guys can influence things. Things have to change. The way we educate our children has to change. It isn't good enough for our children to be confused about things that they're taught in school, right? Confused about evolution, confused about the things that their RE teacher says about school, about religion and about Islam, right? That religion is another big, like one of the things about individualism is this idea of free choice, right? So in school, they will be taught, sometimes even by Christian teachers, they will be taught that religion is a matter of personal choice. Religion is a matter of personal choice. Do you know what this ultimately means? If it's a matter of personal choice, it means everybody's choice is the same. Everyone's choice is the same, right? So the Christian's choice is the same as the Muslim's choice, the Jew's choice is the same as the Christian's choice, the Hindu's choice is the same. Everybody's choice, it's just a matter of choice. Everyone's choice is the same. Religion is not discussed from the point of view of truth. So when in RE they compare religions, they'll study what does Islam say about euthanasia and what does Christianity say. What does that have anything, well, that's got nothing to do with the truth of Islam, or the truth of Christianity, or the falsehood of Islam, or the falsehood of Christianity. That's not a truly comparative study of religion. It's just picking some random thing out of it that's made the news, right? That's become controversial, and basically, and making a comparison. Let's compare this thing about Christianity and Islam. Let's compare this thing. Oh, and atheists say this, right? So our children get exposed to this stuff, but they have no exposure to the truth claims of Islam. Why do we believe? Like, everybody has to think about, why do we believe Islam is true? What are the evidences for the truth of Islam? That's not studied. That's not considered. That's like, oh no, those things don't matter. Everybody, like everybody's choice is valid. That's individualism. That's also a philosophical position. That's individualism. Everybody's choice is valid, right? But let's face it, right? The Prophet ﷺ came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bil bayyinati wa zubur, right? He came with proofs, right? قد جاءكم برهان من يا أيها الناس قد جاءكم برهان من ربكم وأنزلنا إليكم نورا مبينا. O people, a proof has come to you from your Lord. Meaning a proof that proves the truth of something. That can prove himself or itself to be truth. Right? وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكُمْ نُورًا مُبِينًا. And we have sent down to you a clear light, i.e. the Quran. Right? It's a light. It shows you the way around darkness. Right? Meaning there is a claim to truth. This is not how our children learn deen from us in terms of understanding what that claim to truth is. That is not how religion is discussed in school. So they grow up with the idea of individual choice. I can choose to be a Muslim or I can choose to be something else. They're not thinking about truth. Because society doesn't think about truth. Nobody cares about truth anymore. Right? The modern age, or if you like, European culture is a beyond truth culture. Nobody's interested in any kind of truth. The only truth that matters is your truth. Whatever you do is true. Whatever you do is true. And there are different ideas and philosophies that basically justify this. Is this how we want our children to grow up and live? To have these ideas and these ideologies? Well, actually, do you know what? Whatever your answer is in your head, if you think no, I'm sorry, my friends, you don't have a choice. That's exactly how your children are being brought up. That is exactly how they're being brought up. Through school, through college, through university, and then through life, right? And most of us won't even know that our children live by these ideals. It just so happens that some of them choose to remain true to their Islamic identity and others do not. The solution to this is a proper Islamic education. The solution to this is a proper Islamic education. I'm not saying everybody has to become a scholar. A proper Islamic education, not headbanging with alif ba ta tha for 10 years. A proper Islamic, I'm sorry, but I'm beginning to speak about this in harsh terms because actually it's kind of stupid what we do. It really is, right? It makes zero sense the way we educate our children, 0 sense. But we keep doing it. Parents keep pressurizing the Maulana Sahab, Quran Sharif khatam furao. Quran Sharif sabakhlawa. That kind of stuff. It's like what are you doing? What is this holy grail that is the Quran Sharif sabakh? What are you after? What does that mean that your child is going to do tilawah of the Quran for the rest of his life? He might not pick up the Quran for the next 15, 20 years or 30 years. Right? So what's important is to teach him the material that will get him to pick up the Quran for the rest of his life. And for that, he has to understand who is Allah. Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the true and one God? Who is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Why was he sent as a prophet? Why is he the best of creation? Right? Why is he the true prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? These are the things that they have to learn. These are the things that they have to learn. Why is the Quran the true word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is the proof that the Quran is the true word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is what our children have to learn. And you might be thinking, oh, let's not go there. What if we can't prove it? Actually, on that point, you can be 100% confident. The Muslim community, the Muslim ummah stands on the shoulders of giants. Ulama in this ummah have been dealing with these types of things since the first century. Since the first century, because they understood that the Quran itself came as a proof. The Quran itself is a proof. So whenever there was any kind of batil, whenever any deviant idea surfaced, they established the proof against it. They established the proof against it. And they kept doing that all the way until modern times. There are books in Arabic that actually refute and critique every single modern idea up until the 20th century. Right? And some of the work now continues in the English language. Limited, but it still continues. But the problem is, it is not filtering down to the community. Because we think it's not relevant to our kids. But it is relevant to them. All right? Now let me now move on to a completely different, slightly different direction, right? I taught, so the thing I do nowadays, right, is I teach courses to young people and adults about proofs of Islam. That's basically all I'm interested in doing. That and then from there I help them move on to studying the essence of Islam. You know what I said, the ma'lum min ad-deen bid-darura. This was a deliberate transition. Before that, I used to teach the alim course at Ibrahim College, meaning I was busy training ulama and imams. Right? So now it won't be too difficult nowadays if you in your interactions to find an Ibrahim College graduate who's an imam of a masjid or teaches in a madrasa or something like that. Right? That's what I was doing. And eventually I realized, you know what, this is ivory tower work, it's done, it's established. There are some serious gaps in the community that need to be addressed. So I left in 2019 and I started this project, right? Focusing on the causes of doubt about Islam. The things that cause doubts about Islam in the minds of really adults. Let's face it, right? It's not just young people. With young people, we do preventative work. So the courses I do for young people targeting 14 to 18-year-olds, I consider it to be prevention. These are children that they're doing well in school and so on, but they don't know. They need to be educated so that they can resist. So I call it, that's just called building resilience, right? So that their defenses are adequate against those concepts as they go through college and as they go through university. Then you have other young people, right, who have left Islam. I came across one person so far, out of all of the people I've dealt with, and I've dealt with quite a few young people who've left Islam. I've only dealt with one who had a decent knowledge of Islam. Used to read a lot and had a pretty decent knowledge of Islam and knew arguments for and arguments against, but was still struggling. He was open to Islam, but was still struggling with deciding what to do. And eventually together we identified that he had a psychological issue, that he has a psychological resistance to Islam. And I want to talk about this a little bit. Right? Because, of course, we're going to talk about the things that cause doubts in the minds of children, right? So this is what I do, right? I teach some courses to young people 14 to 18 years old. One of them is a mentoring program, another one is a more detailed program, right? Because that's a gap. Because all of you, your children, at the age of 14, 15, they're going to stop studying. And they can't do 10 hours a week in the masjid anymore. That's unrealistic. So I give them a two-hour a week course, right? So in the summer, and then I have a course for adults that basically focuses on the proofs of Islam and the proofs of the foundations of Islam, mainly the epistemological foundations, meaning like on what basis, how does Islam establish that something is true when it claims it's true, right? Now, over the summer of this year, I taught a group of 28 youngsters, aged between 14 and 18 again, a short introduction to some of these ideas, right? And at one point, this question came up. What are the things that cause doubts in the minds of young people? And I wasn't sure what to do. So I thought to myself, one option is for me to just make a list of things that I think cause doubts in their minds, right? And then just teach them that and discuss that. So in the end, I thought, you know what, I'm going to ask them. I'm going to see what they think, right? So I just went into the class and I said, okay, here's the issue, right? You know, we have these dangers against Islam. Do you agree? Yeah, of course we agree. Yes, we will struggle with this stuff. Okay, then you tell me, what are the issues that cause confusion and doubts about Islam in your mind? Or what are the things, what are the dangers against Islam? You tell me, right? And these are the things that they said, right? Because let's face it, right? If there's 13, 14-year-olds in here, it's their age group that's telling me this stuff, right? So, you know, and they mentioned things like social media as a practical influence, all right? Social media influences our opinions on different things by giving us access to them. So social media to them is a question of access. They access lots of different things unbeknown to their parents. Parents do not know. 90% of parents have no idea what's going on in the heads of their children. Have no idea because they don't talk to them, right? Many of them don't have the language to talk to them, yeah? Or worse, they don't have the relationship to talk to them. All right, so there's your problem, right? So they have access, and it's a serious threat to young people who first access these things when their iman is not yet established and strong. Because let's face it, young people's iman isn't established and strong and firm, and I would add resilient at the age of 13, 14. It's not. But by that point, they've already accessed this stuff. My son was 12, right? My son was 12 in an Islamic school for which I paid fees, coming home and telling me, Abu, can I have a mobile phone because all of my friends have it? Mobile phone as in a smartphone. Can I have a smartphone because all of my friends have a smartphone? These are Muslim Islamic school parents. What are they doing giving their 12-year-olds smartphones? Have they lost the plot? If you give your 12-year-old a smartphone, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter how you spin it to me, right? You live in some kind of alternate reality. You live in some kind of utopia. Do you understand? And based on that, you justify your decision to give your 12-year-old a smartphone because it is absolute nuts to do something like that. It's crazy, right? But oh no, you know, I want my child to be happy, etc. Yeah, like seriously, what are people doing? But that's the reality. That's the reality. So you tell me, how in the world is that child not going to access that stuff? Oh, you're going to put parental, you know, like I discussed this on social media once. Can't believe I said that. We discussed it on social media, right? And there were some parents who were like, yeah, but you can use parental controls and blah, 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 blah. So I said, okay, I'll accept that answer if you can guarantee me that all of the parents use parental controls. Because my son first saw pornography on his classmate's phone. So even the fact that I hadn't given him a smartphone didn't help me much, right? So it's all well and good you putting parental controls. It's not going to save the children. The problem is that there's a wider problem. The problem is we are making the wrong decisions collectively, right? That's the issue. So now some of them are going to be on Facebook, right? Girls 10, 11 years old are on Facebook, are on Instagram, right? And their Instagram influencers are dictating to them how they should dress, how they should behave, how they should think, Because they're now enamored by this person, right? They're influenced by this person. So this person, complete jahil, ignorant of pretty much ignorant of Islam, obviously, right? Because they wouldn't be on there if they had knowledge of Islam. But often not particularly intelligent even, right? But there they are, influencing your child on how to wear the hijab and how to do really nice makeup with hijab and stuff. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Yeah, look at me like my children don't do that. They are our children. Everybody thinks not my kids. They're our children. They're your neighbor's children, your cousin's children, your brother, your sister's children. Maybe, Allah forbid it. Maybe your children. People in this room. All right? It's happening. Yeah? So there you go, right? So this stuff, this stuff shakes them, right? The way, because let's face it, right? Afghanistan, the Taliban have taken over Afghanistan. If your child has access to social media, What kind of discussions are they accessing about that? Tell me in the comments. Somebody posts a news piece about what the Taliban are doing, right? What's going to be in the comments that they're going to read because they have access to social media? What wonderful things. Oh, they're such wonderful, kind gentlemen. MashaAllah, subhanAllah. Is that the comment they're going to read? They're not going to read those kind of comments. They're going to read some nasty stuff. Right? That's going to influence their minds. Right? Okay, number two. This is given to me by the children, right? By my students in this class. Number two. This is a girl. Right? This is a girl suggesting one of the big dangers to our Iman and our Islam is fashion. This is a young Muslim girl, age 14, telling me that one of the big dangers, right, to Islam, to our Iman, right, is fashion. Right? Why? Because the new trends are not modest. Even new trends produced by Muslims, even new trends in hijab aren't modest. Forget about new trends without hijab. Right? They're not modest. Everyone is wearing them, and you can't help but feel left out. Everybody's wearing them, and you can't help but feel left out. Now they're just like the pressure to own just like the pressure for the father to buy the 12, 13-year-old a smartphone because other kids in school have it. The same pressure is on the girls, right, to follow the fashion trends because everybody else is following it. When they don't follow the fashion trend, when they turn up to school wearing a burqa and hijab, they have the mick taken out of them. They have the mick taken out of them, as if they're some kind of prude or something like that. Right? They don't wear makeup. They stand out as the weird one because even the girls in hijab are going to school plastered in makeup. You understand? And you know, like when my son used to come and talk to me about this stuff, right? Honestly, I used to feel really bad, yeah? But he used to tell me about peer pressure, and I used to teach him how to take the mick. I used to teach him how to take the mick out of other people when they used to take the mick out of him. Right? When kids used to... Oh, is it adhan? All right, can you give me 2 minutes before you give the adhan, yeah? So that I wrap up to a particular point. So when he used to come and tell me, oh, you know, they're taking the mick out of me because I read books, because my son used to read a lot. He used to, even in the playground, he used to read books. He used to sit on a bench and read books when other kids are playing, and sometimes they take the mick out of him. So I tell him to just tell them, well, it's not my problem, you're dumb. Because I felt like I had to build inside of him the confidence to hit back at these kids who are like playing sports and they look down on him because he isn't playing sports. So I said to him, well, just tell them that you just have more brain cells. You're just smarter and cleverer, and probably one day they'll be working for you. They'll probably have to come to you. When they're sad losers in society, they'll probably have to come to you for a job. I used to have to teach him to cuss back because of peer pressure. And I used to feel bad doing it, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to protect my child. Right? It's like teaching your children self-defense because they're getting bullied. I felt like it was a bit like that, right? So girls, you know, feeling pressured, same thing. Anyway, so I hope you stay. I got lots to say. I hope you guys hang around. I was means being quiet as well, yeah, and listening. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man wala amma ba'd. So I was telling you that young people, when I asked them this question, what are the things that confuse them about religion? They mentioned some things. They talked about fashion, talked about social media. One of the things that came up that was to do with the subject they study was evolution, right? So this is a big one, and this is particularly the issue with kids who study science seriously. Young people who end up going into the sciences and study it seriously. It doesn't happen to everybody. Some people just compartmentalize. They just think, okay, evolution is a scientific theory, my religion is separate from it. Other people, when they study it, in their minds, they incline to the idea that evolution is true, right? And the moment you use the word true, you face problems because obviously you also believe your religion is true. Yes? So if evolution says human beings evolved, then how do I reconcile that with the belief in Islam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam alayhi salam? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam alayhi salam. Now, most Muslims, we tend to, when we hear about evolution, if we haven't looked into it properly, or we haven't read about it, we don't know the theory, we tend to fob it off as some nonsense, right? Yeah, so people fob it off as some kind of nonsense, and they'll be like, well, you know, it doesn't make, seriously, like you're trying to say, you know, they'll make a few kind of sarcastic remarks, or you're trying to say we come from monkeys, etc., etc. So, and people just fob it off. But when it is systematically studied by a young person genuinely, seriously interested in science, perhaps getting A's, you know, aiming for A's in GCSE, A's in A-level, studying biology, chemistry, physics, and so on, then what they study systematically can be quite compelling. Right? Especially at the level of the theory itself. I mean, if there are any issues with evolution as a scientific theory, then the issues really are at the level of the philosophy of science, at the level of the assumptions with which the evidence is studied. So okay, I'm not going to go into that. That is too much, right? Maybe if you join one of my courses, then we'll talk about it. But anyway, there's lots and lots of reading about this. There's lots of material on this. What does Islam, how do we reconcile? Well, not everybody. Like, I don't need to reconcile. So for me, as a Muslim, I don't need to reconcile my faith in Islam, my belief in Islam with evolution. I don't need to reconcile it because I consider evolution to be a scientific theory. And while science remains a method of, remains committed to a method of discovery that can continue to develop and continue to come up with new evidence, I cannot subject my religion, which has a substantial claim to truth, based on ideas that are evolving. So imagine, I'll give you a simple example, right? Some scholars will say, there's a certain verse in Surah Al-Anbiya in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Big Bang. And they'll be like, oh, this is a scientific miracle of the Quran, right? Because the verse sounds like it's talking about something similar to the Big Bang. The problem with doing that is that you're doing things the wrong way around. Instead of subjecting the theory to what the Quran says, instead of subjecting like the scientific data to what the Quran says, you're doing the opposite. You're interpreting the Quran according to the science. But the problem with that is that science doesn't deal with truth. Science deals with theories and models that attempt to explain reality. But those models, they get added to. So if there's a new discovery, the theory, it doesn't entirely change, but it evolves. The theory evolves, like evolution. The scientific theory evolves. The scientific theory changes as new data is developed. So therefore, generally, like atheist scientists, you know, they'll say, because we're constantly discovering, one day we will prove that God doesn't exist. Which philosophically makes no sense. You can't prove a negative. Like, you can't prove that God doesn't exist. The existence of God is always going to remain a possibility. You can't scientifically prove that because science isn't in the business. If anybody is interested in science, then this is going to make sense. Otherwise, it's not right. Empirical science isn't in the business of proving negatives. It proves positives, right? It works with data. It works with evidence. There's no evidence if you believe something doesn't exist. So how in the world are you going to prove something doesn't exist? It doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, and of course, the proof for Allah is different. Science deals in empirical matter, in material evidence, right? Whereas all religions rely upon a wider spectrum of evidence, including the metaphysical, right? So, okay, I'll stop there. Anyway, evolution is an issue for eventually becomes an issue for a lot of young people. Now, do we have an answer for that? Well, yes, we do. In fact, not only do we have an answer, but there are actually models, and that's all I'll say about it now because I don't want to confuse people. There are actually ways in which evolution can be discussed that are actually compatible with the story of Adam alayhi salam. There's no problem. You know how dinosaurs, people ask the question about dinosaurs and they say, what does Islam say about dinosaurs? Generally our answer is, well, Islam doesn't confirm it or deny it. There's no problem. If you want to believe in dinosaurs, no problem. The issue is that The problem, the contradiction with Islam is only if you believe in something that Islam denies. Or if you believe in something that contradicts with Islam. If you believe in something that doesn't contradict with Islam, because Islam is a religion that goes with the religious evidence that establishes certain truths, right? So there is only an issue if something you believe or think contradicts with that. If there's no contradiction, there's no problem. So with dinosaurs we say, well, there's nothing in our tradition or in the Quran and the Sunnah that confirms or denies that. In fact, there may even be hints that there was animal existence before human beings. So therefore, there's no problem. Go with the scientific data. It's not a problem. For the most part, what everybody has to understand is, principally, there is no contradiction between Islam and science. There can be certain issues that require an adjusted understanding, that require a kind of an amalgamation, right, of an aspect of Islam with a particular scientific theory. Those things are quite easily done if you respect both. If you're an atheist, you're not going to want to do that. If you're an atheist, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm going to try to understand the science in conjunction with religion because I don't believe in religion, because, you know, you don't even believe in God. But if you're a religious person, if you're a Muslim or even a Christian, then because of the fact that you will consider a wider set of proofs, you don't have a problem bringing the two together. Christianity has a history of a complete rejection of science, right? And resistance against science. Islam doesn't. Islam has a history of inspiring science. So fundamentally, there actually isn't an issue, except with one little detail, and that is the creation of Adam alayhi salam. And even that, if somebody comes up to me and says, Mawarid Sahab, based on what I've understood and my extensive study in science, I believe the theory of evolution is in fact true. You understand? But I'm a Muslim and I believe in all the truths of Islam. But obviously, if I believe in the theory of evolution, then there's this little bit of detail about the creation of Adam alayhi salam that I can't reconcile. I can't make sense of my belief. So there's two simple ways to do that, right? You simply have to say, well, the fact that it's true that the animal kingdom or biological life evolved based on natural selection, etc., right? The fact that that has happened does not discount Allah, first of all. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know Allah has a sunnah in the universe. He proceeds to create in the universe according to a predestined method. Meaning everything isn't created like that. Otherwise we would be born out of thin air, right? But our parents come together and there's inception and, and there's 9 months of development in our mother's wombs and all of that, right? There's a process. So therefore there is the possibility of processes in history that the Quran didn't speak about in detail. So consolidation is possible until you face an actual contradiction. The only actual contradiction is with the story of Adam alayhi salam. And there are ways in which that can also be consolidated. Or at least, if we accept that this is, if we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we believe literally that Allah created Adam alayhi salam directly, right, which is what the mainstream Islamic belief is, then that does not imply a complete adjustment of the theory of evolution. It just implies that the model about the history of biological life on Earth has a slight little tweak to it. It does not completely refute the whole theory of evolution. That is if this person who's talking to me feels compelled to believe in evolution. But most people don't, right? My point is that the idea that evolution is contradictory with religion is also Christian baggage. It's not such a big deal in Islam. It's been inflated because we don't like the idea, and we've been taking the mick out of the idea for years now. That makes sense? Meaning people have their own individual convictions that don't always contradict with Islam. And sometimes the contradiction is a lot smaller than we sometimes make it out to be in society. All right? And now there's books written on this anyway. There's quite a lot of detail. I'll stop there about evolution. Right. Other issues to do with, what confuses children in schools. And you have to really take this seriously. their exposure to other ways of life and other religions in school, right? Recently, I was contacted by Maulana up north, and I'm telling this story. I took his permission to tell this story, right? I won't mention which town and who, but he contacted me and said 6 girls between the age of 12 and 16 had left Islam in his town. Do you know why? Because they had been brainwashed by their RE teacher, who eventually helped them leave home, because when their parents wanted to get to the bottom of it, they called social services. Right? And all 6 of those children ended up moving away from home. Not because their parents wanted them to, but because they were sold this story of you should be able to live life how you want, and it's your choice, and if anybody goes against their choice, then they're infringing on your freedom, etc., etc., and you shouldn't accept that even if it's your parents, blah, 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 blah. Eventually they end up leaving from home. Now, those kids, right, those kids might at that moment think this is no big deal, but they are going to be miserable being away from their families. And they were moved away from their families by their choice, not their family's choices. They chose it, right? Because they wanted to get away from a religious environment after being brainwashed by their RE teacher. So their exposure to atheism was because of school and a particular teacher. One of the kids in my class that I taught in the summer was 16 years old, Muslim, atheist. Right? I didn't know. Eventually his parents admitted it to me. His journey to atheism, again, influence of RE in school. Influence of RE in school. My point is that people are under this kind of delusion that when they disbelieve in religion, they've discovered some kind of truth. They haven't discovered some kind of truth, but they have been conditioned. Now, obviously they're going to say, yeah, but obviously a child who grows up in religion has also been conditioned. Of course they have. Like, why would anybody have a problem admitting that we bring our children up on religion and condition them to be brought up on religion because we believe that is the truth? That's irrelevant, right? The question is, if this society believes in freedom of religion, then why is it brainwashing our children away from the religion that they've been brought up in? The contradiction isn't with us. The contradiction is over there, number one. Number two, why do we bring our children up on Islam and don't do something stupid like saying, oh, you grow up and choose whatever you want? Because the reason why we don't believe in that kind of nonsense is because we actually believe Islam is the truth. We don't believe in Islam because it's our way of life and our ancestors did it. When the mushrikun of Makkah, and all the adults understand this, right? When the mushrikun of Makkah said, we have found our forefathers doing this, so we do it, i.e. worshipping idols. Did Allah say, oh, mashallah, that's a really, really wonderful argument? Your forefathers did it, so you do it as well. That's a great argument. What does the Quran do? It criticizes them for it. It rejects that argument. Just because your forefathers do it, doesn't mean you should do it as well, right? Meaning, we don't follow Islam just because our parents follow it. Our parents bring us up on Islam because they believe it to be the truth. The question now, and the question really with all of these issues, is, okay, well, why is it the truth? How is it the truth? Why is it the truth? That's the question. I can't deal with that in 5 minutes. But the point is that it's not the same as liberal society where it's just a choice. It's just a choice. Religion is just a choice. Look, like I've sat with just recently, right? I was teaching on a course with some Christian priests. It was an interfaith course, right? And I was teaching a particular aspect of Islam to a group of students who were Muslim Christian. They were actually students of theology, right? Studying at Oxford and places like that. I was talking to the priests afterwards, telling them about my work, right? And this is the Christian kind of notion of all of this, right? Like everybody's going on about, oh, but it's a matter of choice, and it's like, oh, people have their own way and they have their own journeys, etc., etc. And I'm standing there going, I'm sorry, but I don't accept this. I believe in Islam as the truth, the one and only truth. That is what I believe, and I can attempt to prove it to you. You don't like that? You think I'm fundamentalist because of it? It's too bad. That is what we believe as Muslims. We don't apologize for that. The modern world wants us to apologize for that. I was just reading a paper, last night I finished a paper, which was a study of 19 Spanish converts who left Islam. All right? But I don't want to talk about it. But they left Islam because they couldn't handle all the halal haram. Everything's haram. Too many things are haram, right? They couldn't handle the prohibitions and they left. That's the majority. That's basically what the study found, right? But what was really annoying was that the two authors, I don't know what their religion is, didn't sound like it was Islam. The authors, what was really annoying about them is the fact that Muslims believe in halal and haram and follow that strictly. The authors were basically in this academic paper published by the University of Granada in Spain, right? This whole study is these people are in Spain, in Granada. To the authors, this was fundamentalism. It was fundamentalism and extremism, to basically believe in halal and haram, right? And to follow that strictly. It's like, I don't understand what kind of world do we live in that to believe in something firmly is bad, right? So there's a kind of twisted, there's this twisted thinking that if you believe something to be true, sometimes there's something wrong with you. You have to believe, oh, everything is okay and everybody's okay, and believe, I was reading one piece, right? I was reading one piece and, and it was quoting a philosopher who was saying the modern world is the belief in nothing. The modern world is basically, you're truly modern if you believe in nothing, right? Basically, you're just some, I don't know, wishy-washy, kind of slippery, ideologically, philosophically nothing kind of person, all right? It's not a bad thing to believe in something. Absolutely, you should believe in something. Your whole life is built on beliefs, right? You're born, you believe your parents are your parents. You believe you're alive, you believe you think. Like the Kantian, I think, therefore I am, right? Immanuel Kant, when he finally decided, actually, do you know what? I exist because I think. I think, therefore I am. There are things that we believe in. Absolutely, our whole life revolves around that. The question is your belief based on any kind of proof, and what is that proof? And our proof centers upon the Prophet ﷺ. The claim of the Prophet ﷺ that he is a true Prophet of Allah, it centers upon that. The question is, how do we prove that? And there is a very, very good systematic method of proof that, in my opinion, and I can discuss this and demonstrate, I teach this, right? In my opinion, is a far better objective proof for something than any scientific theory. Any scientific theory, put it up against the way the Islamic tradition proves that the Prophet ﷺ, A, existed, B, he claimed prophethood, and that his story is true. The method that we employ to prove this particular piece of history is far better than what the scientists use to prove 14 billion years of history. Thank God we don't have to worry about 14 billion years. It's only 1400 years for us. It's not that hard. But we actually have a systematic method. But it's a systematic method that almost every single Muslim is ignorant of. Hardly anyone knows about it. In my opinion, every single Muslim child today should be taught. How do we know the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is true? Right? Well, we know because truthful people told us. Yeah, but how do you know who they are? Oh, guess what? We actually do know who they are. We know every single person that transmitted even the smallest piece of information from the Prophet ﷺ to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next generation. We know them by name, by birth, by death, by life circumstances, and by their trustworthiness. Every single person. That is what you call a connected empirical history. Oh, but how is it empirical? We don't have anything that survived. What, you don't believe people anymore? Like, oh, we're going to believe this fossil, right, that we think is 10 million years old. But we're not going to believe people. How can we believe people? Our lives don't revolve around people. Our lives revolve around things. We're materialists. I mean, it's honestly like the level of stupidity in the way Islam is critiqued by Orientalists and atheists, right? You need to go and actually see it for yourself and read it for yourself. The point is, we have a systematic method that proves the historicity of the Prophet ﷺ. Not just the fact that he existed, but the story of his life is proven to the extent that if we find that something from the Prophet's life does not meet the burden of proof, is a fabricated narration, it becomes haram for us to believe in it. If you get, like for example, most Muslims believe in the story of Buhayra the monk. You heard of Buhayra in the Seerah. You've all heard the story of Buhayra the monk, right? Who basically said, who met the Prophet ﷺ in childhood, yeah, and said that, you know, this boy is going to be the final, you know, that story, right? When he was traveling to Syria with his uncle, the Prophet ﷺ met Buhayra the monk. Remember the Buhayra Rahib story? Most people who've studied the Seerah have heard this story, yeah? Guess what? The story is not authentically proven. The story isn't authentically proven. However, that kind of story is acceptable in Seerah. Meaning you can accept it as a piece of history. Why? Because as Muslims, our scholars understand that when it comes to historical information for all societies, they don't look for substantial authentication. You know what I'm saying? Just the fact that the story is transmitted is sufficient, right? And of course, in this case, this story has a chain of transmission. It has a chain of transmission. But we don't accept it as authentic because there is some sort of weakness in the chain of transmission. Does that make sense? Now, while we can accept it in the story of the Seerah, we can't accept this as a proof of prophethood. We can't accept this story as a proof that, oh, because the monk said this and it's in history, the prophet must be a true prophet. We don't accept it. We actually reject the story as a proof of prophethood. Why? Because for something to qualify as a proof of prophethood, the story has to be authentic. How can you build a story of the truth of the prophet based on inauthentic narrations? Yeah, that's the kind of detail the tradition goes into when it comes to proving the story of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. If somebody wants to reject it, they can, but show me any other story in world history, not just European history, any other story in world history that is proven to the same level of reliability. Good luck trying to do that, because nobody has. Even Orientalists accept that it's a phenomenal feat, the way in which the Islamic tradition has preserved this history. Now, if the history can be proven to be true, what does that mean exactly? Does that not mean that the authentic narrations about the Prophet ﷺ actually have truth in them? If he says, well, you know, the Prophet, you understand what I'm trying to say to you? If the story in history is true, if you tell me a story about your grandfather, and I believe you're a trustworthy person, right? And I believe that story, have I done something wrong? Have I done something wrong? Right? Can you turn around and say to me, oh, you believe in fairy tales? You can't tell me I believe in fairy tale when this trustworthy brother over here, who I know to be a trustworthy person, has told me a story based on his direct interaction, right, about his grandfather. Why would I not believe that? If anybody, if you now don't believe in it, and I gather 10 people and say arbitrate this issue, they'd call you irrational. They say for you not to believe this story is irrational. Why would you not believe it? You have no reason to disbelieve in the story. This is the nature of the proof of Islam. The proof is of a level that it is irrational to disbelieve it. It is irrational to disbelieve it. I'll stop there, right? One of the things that I must talk about, there's lots of other issues, right? One of the reasons why young people eventually end up kind of submitting to their doubts is because that's what they want. It's called desire. When I was dealing with that young person who knew a lot about Islam, knew a lot about arguments for Islam, arguments against Islam, right? And he was like, Sheikh, I know the arguments and I get them. And I actually think that the arguments are solid, right? So I said, then what's the problem? Why don't you take the Shahada? He couldn't quite get to the bottom of it. Eventually, I identified, we talked and I helped him. And it turned out that actually he was scared. Because he felt that the way Islam had been taught to him is so strict and so hard that if he believes in something like the hellfire, he will be condemned to it for sure. Because the way he had been brought up on religion, it was so hard, it was so strict and so hard, that he felt convinced that he wouldn't be able to handle it. He wouldn't be able to follow it. He would commit so much sin that he would eventually end up in hellfire. So therefore, psychologically, it was just better for him to escape in an alternative set of ideas that saved him from that pressure, saved him from that tension. of thinking that he might go to hellfire. So his mind was naturally leaning towards the arguments against Islam. So eventually I said to him, first of all, Islam isn't what your community taught you. There's lots and lots of cultural biases and all sorts of stuff, right? And you don't have to, first of all, you don't have to follow Islam 100%. Who follows Islam? Do you think I follow Islam 100%? My life is full of sin, right? I have to make tawbah every single day to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the sins I commit. You understand? People make Islam out to be so difficult, unnecessarily calling things like haram and calling things forbidden, and you're going to go to hellfire for this and blah, and this, that, and the other, when, first of all, there is no fixed opinion on those matters. You're going to tell a young person, you know what, if your trousers go below your ankles, it's going to burn in the hellfire. Don't tell them that, because that's not even an agreed upon position in Islam. Our ulama don't agree that it's obligatory for your trousers to be above your ankles. Some say it's obligatory, some do not. When something like that happens, you can't attack people on it. There's a fundamental principle in Islam. If there is legitimate difference of opinion on a particular matter, you cannot make that a basis for condemnation and criticism. You can't say to somebody, astaghfirullah, how dare you do something like this, it's haram, if that is a matter of difference of opinion. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? But because we don't consider this stuff, because we're not educated about our deen, we attack young people and make their lives really, really difficult. So they snap. They snap under the pressure, right? Look at a young, and this is my last thing, right? Yaqeen Institute did a piece of research, and they have some great resources on the truth of Islam and things like that, right? They did really good quality stuff. But they did a piece of research on why people leave Islam, right? And they had like a whole it's quite an extensive piece of research, right? But in the hierarchy of reasons, they ranked them based upon the number of respondents who basically quoted that as the reason. They found that the highest ranking reasons had something to do with the behavior of Muslims, not to do with Islam's claims to truth. They were just fed up of the behavior of Muslims. Just fed up. They just said, you know what? A religion whose followers behave like this can't be true. I'm off. I've had enough of Muslims. You understand? And some of it begins from childhood, right? Just today, one of my colleagues was telling me that he just had his first day teaching at in a new job, teaching children on the weekend, right? And he's telling me, like, we spend a lot of time talking about what's the right way to teach, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I have 17, 18 years in education, so I have a lot to say about how children should be taught. And he's telling me, Ustad, the first thing that struck me was how harsh the teachers were. The first thing that struck me was how harsh the teachers were to these children. Constantly shouting at them. Little children. They barely even understand their instructions, but they're shouting at them, grabbing them by the arm to get, to check if they've got something in their hand and stuff like that. Like, there was no smile, there was no gentleness, nothing. You know what I say? I say, well, what kind of Islam is that? Did you learn that? Did you learn that behavior towards children from the Prophet? Did the Prophet ﷺ behave like that towards children? Right? So now, if a young person grows up with that kind of harsh treatment from people who are supposed to be representatives of Islam, and then faces arguments that also cast a doubt over Islam, is he going to feel particularly loyal to the deen? Is he going to feel like, oh, you know what, how can these wonderful people be just... Because their memory is filled with this harshness. Our parents, when they want us not to do something, right? What do they say? They say, Allah marba. They say, Allah marba, Allah marba. Mane Allah rar kunu kham nai, huruttar khali marta Allah. Allah marba. Allah's got nothing better to do than to beat up children. We've embedded this harsh Islam, we've embedded it into our society. And I'm telling you, the way we behave, right? You know, people preaching other people about religion when they themselves don't practice it. Like, go easy, dude. It's like, you're not perfect. Why are you acting like you're some perfect person for preaching to somebody, making their life difficult? Oh, brother, don't do this. Oh, brother, don't. Let them be. Let them have their own journey. They're believers, right? They will come. Focus on educating people and so on. Like the prophets of Allah. Musa alayhi salam is being told, a prophet of Allah is being told to go to Fir'aun, a tyrant, perhaps one of the worst tyrants in history. A man who enslaved a whole nation, the Jews, right? Musa alayhi salam is being told to go to Fir'aun and be gentle. Musa alayhi salam is being told, Allah Musa alayhi salam dekhoira, Fir'aun orge se jao, ar norom basha metyo, norom tekyotal, norom bebohar koryotal loge. You understand? We can't have that same attitude towards children. Children are worse than Fir'aun. Do you understand? Somebody was harsh to another person, right? And he said to me, his response to him, this is actually in the books, it's an old story. And he said to him, do you know what? You're not better than Musa, alayhi salam, and I'm not better than Fir'aun. So take it easy. I'm not worse than Fir'aun, sorry. You're not better than Musa alayhi salam, and I'm not worse than Fir'aun, so take it easy. Right? Something along those. You understand my point, guys? The highest ranking reasons why people were leaving Islam was to do with the behavior of Muslims. Behavior of Muslims. The behavior and conduct of religious people. Not everyday Muslims, religious people. Right? And the behavior and conduct of religious leaders. People like me. Those were the highest ranking reasons why people were leaving the deen. So there's a lot of things that have to change because we create a psychology that causes inside people find they just need a justification. They're looking for a justification to escape because we've created this pressure cooker, right? That is called religious life. Why are we doing that? Why are we doing that? Why are we making our children's lives difficult in the name of Islam? Right, threatening them that Allah is going to punish them and beat them up and stuff like that. What? You never heard that Allah is Ghafurur Rahim. You don't read Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim every day. You don't read Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen every day. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, that Allah is Rahman and Rahim. You don't read that? A child worries that Allah might punish him. You're supposed to say, no, don't worry, Allah is Rahmanur Rahim. Do you understand? If bunks off school, you don't tell him Allah Marba. Doesn't pray, don't tell him Allah Marba. That's not kind, that's just false. Allah isn't going to punish him because he's a child. Right? So we have to change the way we think about Islam. Islam is supposed to be al-Hanafiyyatu samha, this balanced, moderate deen that attracted people to it. And here we are putting off our own children because of the way we conduct ourselves, because of the way we behave. That's the last point I'm going to make because I don't want to end up being here until midnight. I know it's not school day tomorrow, but I'm now hungry. So if there's any questions, I'll take them, and then we can close, inshallah, yeah? So start with the sisters because they've already sent them in. And if any of the brothers want to ask a question, just raise your hands and you guys take note who it is, yeah? How do you as parents discourage children from using Snapchat, Facebook, etc.? Okay, so how do we do that? How do we stop children? You just stop a minute, they're your children. What's the problem? What's the problem? But don't say Allah Marba. Right? Look, the reasons why your children shouldn't be on Snapchat and shouldn't be on Instagram, etc. The reasons why are very good. They're very good reasons. They're very legitimate reasons. Right? I have always found that children respond well when you reason with them. When you discuss the issue, you reason with them and you convince them that it's the right thing to do. After having tried to convince them that it's the right thing to do, if they still don't listen, that's when you apply your authority. Authority comes after reasoning. You reason first. You explain the reason first so that they can be convinced by your line of thought. If that doesn't work, then you say, okay, well, in that case, I'm stepping in. You think about it some more, but I'm stepping in as your parent. You don't jump in first and say, right, I'm taking this away from you. No more. I made a mistake. This is not going to happen. You can't have your phone. You don't do it like that. You reason with them. Children understand reasoning. And you know what? If you get into the habit of reasoning with your children, they'll be smarter when they grow up. Because they've developed, their whole life has been based on these intelligent conversations with their parents. You've taught them to reason. So reason with them. Explain to them why it is harmful. And if you don't know why it's harmful, then read. Go online and read why it's harmful for children to access social media. Right? And then reason with them and say, look, the research says this could happen, that could happen, these are the dangers. Oh, mom, but I'm not going to be in those dangers. But it's my job to protect you, isn't it? If I was a parent, you know what I say to my children? I say, okay, after our discussion, if you were in my position, if you were my parent, right, what would you do? 9 out of 10, that ends the argument. That ends the discussion. Because let's face it, they want the phone. It's part of their desire to want the smartphone, to want social media. They want it, but they know it's not good for them to have it. You just have to find the right way to reason. They know. If you're 13 years old, you want a smartphone, right? All of the evidence, all of the research says you shouldn't have it. It's bad for you. That your parent, if they're giving it to you, they're doing the wrong thing. They're harming you by giving you the smartphone. Now, if you ask that child, if they have even basic intelligence, you say, do you know what, after everything that you've heard, if you were the parent, what would you do? The answer is fairly straightforward. Most children, I think, would get it by then. If they still don't, then you say, well, I'm your parent, I'm going to put my foot down now. Well, that's okay, because you've built up to it, all right? But just every time, just coming down, you know, like divine command, it doesn't work. Eventually they snap, all right, and they rebel. And if they don't rebel in front of you out of respect, they rebel behind your back. They rebel behind your back because they haven't, the reason for them not to do something isn't prominent in their mind because you don't reason with them. To know reasons, reasoning is needed. To know reasons for something, you have to reason. You never reason, they're not going to get the reasons. Even if somewhere in the back of their minds they know it's bad, they're still going to do it. Because it needs to be foremost in their mind, right? That's why, what does Allah say? Allah says, وَذَكِّرْ, remind. فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَ تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Because reminding benefits the believers. Why does Allah want us to worship Him? The answer is in the question. The question really is, why should we worship Allah? Because Allah wants us to worship Him. Why does Allah want us to worship Him? Because He wants to. You understand the answer? The point is, Allah is Allah. Allah is our creator. He is the master of the universe. The world, the universe doesn't revolve around us. We didn't make the universe. We didn't create ourselves. We did not come into existence by our own volition. We didn't choose to come into existence. We were created. Right? Even if you're an atheist, you don't know how you came to be. You don't know. Right? The point is, you have zero control over yourself. Right? Somebody else controls it. As Muslims, we believe that controller is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has ultimate power. Because let's face it, all of the signs indicate that He created the universe. That is the most logical conclusion if you think it through systematically, right? The most logical conclusion is someone created the universe. It didn't come out of nothing. To think that it came out of nothing, it's absurd, right? It's easy to say it. Some physicist like Krauss turns around and says, a universe out of nothing, and writes a book. It's easy to say it. It's easy to make arguments. That doesn't mean it makes any sense. Just because you're a celebrated physicist and you say nonsense, it doesn't change nonsense into sense. Nonsense is still nonsense. Things don't just happen out of nowhere. They don't happen today. They didn't happen 14 billion years ago. Because they don't happen today. Things don't happen out of, oh, but then in the quantum realm stuff happens, blah, blah, blah. The quantum realm is not nothing. Nothing is nothing, right? The point I'm trying to make is, all the evidence point to the fact that Allah created the universe. He is the center of the universe. The world, the universe, everything revolves around Allah. He does what He wants. Read the Quran. What does the Quran tell you again and again and again? Allah does what He wants. So why does Allah want us to worship Him? Because He wants it. It's not like your father or dad, why do you want that? Allah is the creator of the universe. You do as He wants. You don't question Him. That is the Quranic, literally, the Quran says, لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. People should worry about the fact that they will be questioned about what they do. Allah will not be questioned. Allah will not be questioned. But in order to accept that, you have to first recognize Allah. You have to know Allah by His attributes. Well, does Allah want you to worship Him? What does the Quran say? Does Allah want you to worship Him? Yes. Why does He want you to worship Him? Because he wants you to worship him. It's simple as that. It's his wish. It's his desire. Why does he need it? He doesn't need it. He just wants you to do it. Why does he have to need it for? Just because I've asked you to do something for me, don't mean I need it. I just want you to do it. Simple as that. Okay, me you can challenge. But if I'm the one that gave you life, created you, created the world around you, do you understand? And I did all of that by complete independent choice. You didn't have to exist. We didn't have to exist. The universe didn't have to exist. Allah just wanted to create it. It's as simple as that. He doesn't have to justify his decisions to anybody. He doesn't. The problem is that a lot of these conversations happen in the context of Christianity. Christianity is the religion that decided in a meeting what to believe in about Allah. Right? The Nicene Creed that gave them the Trinity was a meeting of bishops who found that different Christians were believing different things, including Tawheed. There were Christians who believed in Tawheed. So they sat in a meeting and they said, all right, okay, let's decide what our belief should be about God. And they voted that it should be the Trinity. You understand? When your religion is based on a vote, then obviously you're going to subject God to your ideas. We don't subject God to our ideas. All of you as children, what did you learn? You learned amantu billahi kama huwa. Remember the words? Iman mujmal. Amantu billahi kama huwa bi asma'ihi wa sifatihi. I believe in Allah as He is. Not as I want Him to be, not as I think He is. I believe in Allah as He is. Now how are you going to know how Allah is? There's only one way to know. That's revelation. There is no other way. There is no other way to know how Allah is other than what He has said about Himself. And He says, don't question my actions. Worry about your own. Right? Allah's attribute, فَعَالٌ لِمَا يُرِيد. He is the doer of whatever He desires. That's kind of makes sense if He's God, right? He's not your slave, you are His slave. You understand my point, guys? So it's really important to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the right way. Allah is Allah. He's not some dude. Allah is Allah. He's a God. Right? He is the creator of this universe, the master of the universe, the master of all of us. Right? You know, some people say to me, oh, you know, like atheists, when they say to me, if God exists, you know, why is there so much evil? The problem of evil. If God exists, why is there so much evil, etc., etc. I said, so I'll say to them, so does that mean you believe in God then? That you believe in God. It seems to me that you don't disbelieve in God. You just think God is evil. It's like, what even didn't just kind of come out of nowhere. We believe, Muslims don't shy away from this problem. We say Allah did create evil, but we do not attribute it to Him. You understand? Allah says, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَى. Allah created the human self, the human soul, and then put inside of it the potential for good and potential for evil. Allah admits it. That is the basis of the test. You understand? We don't have to like, oh my God, that's so difficult. What do we do? Problem of evil. Allah created it because that is the arena of the test. Why did He do it? Because He wanted to. Because He wants, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to understand the difference. You cannot know, as a created entity given consciousness, you cannot know good from bad if there is no way to compare the two. Think about that. You can't, it's impossible. Without some degree of, without some comparison, it's impossible to know what's right and wrong, what's good and bad. One of the biggest concerns in society is mental health. Many youngsters battle with it and feel like certain religious duties take a toll on their mental health. For example, praying or wearing modest clothing gives them anxiety, depression. How should one fulfill religious duties as well as look after their mental health? Well, first and foremost, I've been talking a lot about how we bring up our children, right? And you will find the answer to that question, as well as the answer to why they have mental health issues, in how we've brought them up and the circumstances that they have lived in, right? If your children are suffering bullying in school, don't tell them to man up, and don't act like it's normal, because it's not normal. Protect them, defend them, do something about it. You know, my father's a very, very traditional Bengali, very conservative religious man, but he has some knowledge of Islam. All right, if any of my Islamic teachers ever unjustly punished me, he went and threatened them. Don't you dare touch my son unjustly. You understand? Right? And to this day, when I remember it, honestly, I get emotional because I know other people's parents did not protect them from that. Kids got beaten up and parents didn't say anything. Parents didn't say anything. My father's point is, I'm sorry, but Islam does not give you the license to beat up my child unjustly. You better have a very, very good reason, and it has to be proportionate. If it isn't, I'll beat the living daylights out of you. My father once, I got sticks from a teacher, right? In those days, you know, teachers used to hit, right? We all know, right? This is well known. So I got sticks from a teacher in boarding school, right? And he complained to management. And management didn't do anything about it. 6 weeks later, my father was visiting me again. He did it again. You know what he did? He told him, next time you touch my son, I'm going to come and cut you open. What's the point of this story? The point of it is that I felt protected by my father. How can your child feel protected from you if you let people do whatever they want to them? Do you understand? Like, I wouldn't tolerate a teacher being unduly harsh to my son. I wouldn't. What do you think you're doing? You're supposed to be his teacher. He's supposed to be learning good conduct from you. Why are you being unduly harsh to him for? I wouldn't accept it. So if it's to do with, first of all, make sure you're not the cause. Secondly, and you know, like, speak to them, talk to them, be open, have open dialogue and conversation with them. Secondly, if the problems are elsewhere, make sure you offer them protection. All right? And thirdly, build inside of them confidence in religion. If they are confident in their deen, they will wear the hijab confidently and it won't give them anxiety. Build up that confidence. If you can't do it yourself, make sure they have good mentors around them and good company around them. Right? It's extremely important. And you know what? If they're really, really young, and you want them to wear the hijab, but they're only 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, then don't make them wear the hijab. They don't need to wear it. It's not fard on them yet. Let them gradually build up to it. Okay? Those are the only questions I've got. You guys, you're gone. Yeah. Yeah. Lifelong learners in an Islamic context will happen if the adults, all of the adults in here, start learning. Show your children that you're studying, right? And they will understand. My father is 30, 40 years old and he's still studying. That's what I do to my children. I tell my children I'm a student of knowledge and they see me studying all the time. Right? So you study, you enroll on courses. Let your children know that part of your weekly schedule is to go and continue to study Islam. Oh, Dad, you've been studying your whole life. Isn't that enough? No, son. You know, Islamic education is a lifelong journey, and it needs to be a lifelong journey for you. Right? Let them learn it from you. Lead by example. If you're continuing to study Islam, then they will too. And that doesn't just go for brothers, it goes for sisters as well. Right? Mothers, show your daughters that you are studying as an adult, as a 30-year-old, 40-year-old. You're still studying the deen systematically, properly, formally. And then they'll see that's the example, so they'll continue to do it as well. Adults have to do it first. The crisis of Islamic education starts with the adults. Because you have to face it, right? Children are children. If they're facing trouble, we have played a hand. We have played a hand, and we've played a hand because we haven't educated ourselves. So let's begin with ourselves, and the kids will see our example. And they will follow that. Right? Because that's how they model their lives. They model their lives. You know, children sometimes become abusers because that's what they've witnessed in their parents. Sometimes they resist abuse because they don't want to be like their parents. And sometimes they become model people because their parents are model people. Sometimes they model their behavior on their parents based on what they know their parents did wrong. My parents got this wrong, I'm not going to make the same mistakes. Do you understand? It's a heavy influence on them. One way or the other, it influences them. Right? So we have to be careful how we are as parents. You know, your proudest moment, my proudest moment was when my son said to me, my son's now 17, and we're saying, you know what, you're going to get married early, etc., right? I mean, we're kind of having those types of conversations. And he said to me, you know what am I going to do when I have children, Dad? Right? And he thought about it, and then he said, you know what, I'm just going to do what you and Mum did. And I thought, honestly, I thought that was the greatest compliment anyone could ever give me. When my son said to me, I'm just going to do what you and mum did. That's kind of what we should be aspiring to, you know what I mean? That's more valuable to me than my son earning $1 million and giving all of it to me. That comment, that one comment means more than that. Okay, inshallah. Anything else? Guys are hungry, man. I'm hungry. So go on. Can the Muslim community do more to help? Empower your masajid, empower your imams, empower your maktabs. Look, simple example, guys. How many young people are here right now? 20, 30, 40 maybe? Yes? Right? Every single day between 5 and 7, how many young children go to masjids to study Islam? Come on, you know the answer. Thousands, tens of thousands, 70%. If you want to do something as a community, fix your maktabs, you'll fix the problem once and for all. That's where all the children are. That's where all the youngsters are. Fix those problems. Think about how we can continue education beyond the age of 14, 15. I've come up with a model of mentoring. So I run a program called the Youth Mentoring Program. You can check it out on mawaridlifestyle.com. And all I do is give them 2 hours a week and mentorship. That's it. And I don't just teach them Islam, but I mentor them about career decisions, about their study decisions, about university choices, all of that stuff. You understand? A mentoring program. Because I know they're too busy to study Islam full-time or even like 10 hours a week. You understand? And the food is like getting messed up, so shall we stop? Jazakumullah khairan. Allah bless you all. Allah protect all of us, protect our children. I'm sorry I took so long. I tend to go on and I do apologize. But I hope it was beneficial. I'll come back, do it another time, inshallah. Let's go and eat, inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdihi, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, sallallahu ta'ala wa sallam ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.